The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
CJ, what is the latest on Mitch Marner, the Vegas Golden Knights, and a potential sign and trade? You've been all over this story for The Athletic. There's so many different twists and turns. There's been rumors of even tampering being involved. What's the latest we know right now?
Well, it's June 30th when we're recording this, and that's significant because this would be the last day that a trade can be completed where Mitch Marner does a sign and trade, essentially, if he wants to get an 8-year deal. So that's sort of one deadline. I guess the other would be at noon Eastern time on Tuesday morning. Mitch Marner is a free agent who can go sign with any other team anywhere, including Vegas, of course. And so, you know, if a trade's going to happen, it's got to happen before that point in time where the Leafs are, you know, getting something back for his rights. And so, you know, I don't know if they're going to be able to put it all back together again. I think the fact that things went public here in the last few days probably complicate things. But two facts remain. I believe the Vegas Golden Knights are interested in signing Mitch Marner. I believe the Toronto Maple Leafs, if they can get something meaningful back, would view that at least as, I don't want to call it a small win. There's no win when you're losing a player of Mitch Marner's caliber, but would make probably the whole thing more palatable. And so, you know, we'll see if they can get something done. I mean, the fact that, you know, late Sunday night that there was a deal where Colton Sissons and Jeremy Lauzon ended up in Vegas, I think is a sign of things to come with Nick Hague going back to the Predators. You know, that's Vegas has to move money around here to sign Mitch Marner or to do any other business really of consequence. And that's even with the fact that Alex Pietrangelo's, you know, likely headed for LTIR here once the path for him medically is cleared up. So this is a extremely busy time. Things move fast, but I would say there's still a chance for those rights to be traded, but the window's closing for it to happen.
For sure. What about the rumors that have gone around that this might not have just gone through the clean way, that tampering could be afoot on the part of the Vegas Golden Knights? What do we know about that situation? Is that a legit accusation?
Well, I want to be very clear here. Tampering is a very serious allegation in the NHL. I mean, that's like charging someone with a crime. And It's a very difficult thing to prove in any circumstance. We all know to some degree this past few weeks, really since the combine, that agents for players and teams, everyone's talking. Hockey's a small town. You know, you have a right shot defenseman that's free on July 1st. That's the kind of player we're looking for. Like there's ways around it, I think, that are technically legal. There's a lot of gray involved, but to actually say someone has tampered requires a paper trail, requires something provable. And I have no reason to believe that's the case here. Let's look at the facts with Marner, Vegas, and the Leafs. Vegas tried to trade for Mitch Marner at least twice over time, including at the trade deadline when everything was going on with Carolina. Marner wasn't going to waive for the Hurricanes. I believe there were conversations at that time where he said he would waive for the Golden Knights if a three-way trade could be worked out. Now, that couldn't be done because Vegas wasn't able to satisfy the parts of the deal to make it make sense for Carolina. But at the time, it would have been Rantanen come to Toronto, Marner to Vegas, and then stuff goes to Carolina. The stuff wasn't figured out in a way that made sense, so that trade didn't proceed. But at that point in time, it's obvious if Vegas is trying to trade for a player that they're interested in him. If the player is willing to waive his no movement clause, he's interested in them. The Leafs know this. Like, I guess the point is this. It's not a mystery to anyone involved that Marner could end up in Vegas because of the history here. And so, you know, when everyone says this doesn't make sense, like look at last year when the Leafs got Chris Tanev, they traded for his rights and then signed him to a 6-year contract. So not even a maximum length deal. We saw Tampa Bay Lightning trade for Jake Gensel's rights from the Carolina Hurricanes last year, signed him to a 7-year deal. But that's a contract they could have just given him in free agency, but they sent a pick back to Carolina. You know, there's some value in being able to lock down ahead of the market opening a player, even if you're Vegas and you think you're 89% sure that Mitch Marner would choose you on the open market, there could be the smallest percentage he goes somewhere else. And so Do I believe that some people out there might believe there's funny business here? For sure. But I'm not going to say that it's tampering. Like that's a very serious allegation to throw out. And, I think you got to be careful with how you use that term. And so, in this case, I do believe Vegas still has to clear his salary. The Leafs, obviously, they're not just giving Marner away, I don't think, for a 7th round pick just to say they got something. But if they could trade his rights, I believe they would still do so. I think it makes sense to get something rather than nothing. And especially if it's a player or some assets that can really help their organization. The Leafs don't have a lot of draft capital, right? They've traded a lot of picks in the last few years, going for it at the deadline. So if they got a draft pick and a player or something like that, I think it would make a lot of sense. So, look, there's definitely the situation is drama packed. I think because of the players at the table. I'm not just talking about Mitch Marner. I mean, the Golden Knights as an organization, right? They have a reputation of being like getting their man or getting their men when they really set their eyes to something. The Leafs are the Leafs, so obviously everything they do warrants a lot of attention and conversation. And Ed Marner's, the kind of a rare superstar. I mean, it happens every couple of years. A player of this caliber goes to free agency, but it's certainly not every year you get this kind of star power. So, look, I wouldn't go so far as to say exactly there was tampering here and that's why they're trading him. I think it's a lot more to do with everybody at the table knows what's going on because they've engaged in trade conversations in the past, and there could be a chance to solve each other's problems to some degree to make this make sense. But, the fact that it all came out publicly, I do think complicates it, Julian. And so I really don't know. I can't sit here and pretend if I know they're going to be able to put it back together and make a trade happen. But, I do think I think everyone still is going to try. It just, what is the fair price for something like this it's not that established, right? Like there's, you look at the trades over the years for rights, it's kind of a smorgasbord. So, It's not easy enough to say, hey, well, this is just worth a 1st round pick or 2nd round pick or whatever. It's a little bit more complex, I think, of a deal to make happen. And there's a lot of emotion at the table. And now that there's some allegations out there, I think that doesn't help the process either.
Yeah, I love how you put that particular spin on it with the allegations out there. Those are very serious. But to get to the potential assets as well, I think the fact that we're at a point where any player could get at this stage with their rights could get flipped for a player. That's not something I've immediately seen or at least remember seeing. You mentioned some of those examples with Chris Tanev and Jake Gensel. We're talking about very draft picks being flipped the other way. So the fact that we're in a point now where a player could potentially go the other way. Nick Hague was a possibility. Well, we know now he's gone to Nashville. Nicolas Roy's name was thrown out there. I don't know if there was anyone else who could be thrown in that possibility too. This is a little different from what I'm used to.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard any names other than those. And remember, some of this is tied to the fact that Vegas, just because of the cap constraints, can't keep everybody there and sign this contract. I mean, they have a Jack Eichel extension to sign, presumably at some point here in the nearish future with him 1 year out from potential unrestricted free agency. So, the Golden Knights have to clear money off the books to make everything work. The fact they brought in Colton Sissons, to me, suggests that there's, whether it ends up being part of a rights deal for Marner or something else, that Nicolas Roy is, a player that, I think that they basically already acquired, the player that will replace him in their lineup. So, not saying 100% he's going in a Marner rights deal, but it looks like someone who's on their way out. I mean, they get Lausanne is kind of a replacement, I think, of sorts for Hague. Hague was a restricted free agent. We saw the contract he got in Nashville, over $5 million. That was just not a number I don't think Vegas could get to with all the different things they have going on. So, you're right. It would be unique if it happened to a degree, but, I think ideally trades solve problems for everybody at the table. Like trades, you have to give up something, but you're getting something of value to you. And so, looking, Nicolas Roy has been a great, 3rd, 4th line center for Vegas. I mean, he's had a nice run there, was part of their cup team, basically 13, 14, 15 goal guy, a great forechecker, the exact kind of depth player you're looking for. Like, it's not that the Vegas doesn't like him. It's just they're you have to move something to create the space. So, Even Haig was an OG. He was part of their first draft class, right? We know Vegas doesn't have many of their own picks in the lineup just because they've traded so many of those picks away or the prospects that they used to draft them with. And there's another one gone. This isn't a player they didn't like. It's just business is business. It's, and they're in the business of taking big swings. So, it's a fascinating period. I think the Leafs feel good about the business they've gotten done here in the last few days, it feels like it happened 9 years ago, but it's actually happened since our last show that John Tavares signed a high value contract for Toronto, gave them a serious hometown discount on that deal. The Leafs have locked up Matthew Knies. I know that they're having some discussions about trying to extend Steven Lorentz now, who could become a free agent as of Tuesday. So the Leafs are getting a lot of business done too, but they're doing so knowing that Marner's walking out the door or potentially being traded out the door with his rights. Vegas is doing all this work in the background, knowing they're trying to clear the space for Marner. This is the time of year we're in, and buckle up. I hope you've been enjoying it.
Oh, I've been very much enjoying it, and I need you to hold a thought on Matthew Knies, as I do have one more Mitch Marner question. If this trade goes through, how much do you see Mitch Marner signing for in Vegas?
Well, there's been this sort of rumor that he was going to go on a short-term deal, and I think there might have been some thought to that, but it does seem as though things are lining up for him to sign a longer-term contract now. Look at the deal Mikko Rantanen signed in Dallas, right? 8 years, $12 million. I think maybe it doesn't get to 8 years because that requires a sign and trade, and that has to happen pronto. There's no guarantee it ends up being that. But I think 12 million AAV is the range, and I could see it being longer. And so do they get him at 11.9 or does he get it to 12.2? That's where negotiations happen. But I do think that's the general range you're looking at. And it sounds like there's a push to make it a longer term contract now, versus what, I think at one point could have been something shorter. But we'll see where they land. This is like all the talk about the contract in truth has been speculation, right? Because I'm not saying it's informed speculation. I do think it does reflect what the people involved have been thinking, but the contract, even at this moment, isn't done, right? So, on some level, we're handicapping a fight before the fights happen, or we're handicapping, you can't know 100% how it's going to go, but I do think the winds are blowing a little bit more strongly towards a longer term deal. And I do think that $12 million number is basically the number, give or take, a few hundred thousand each way. But I think that's going to be generally where the AAV lands.
So CJ, as we wrap up Leafs Corner, we had to make a Leafs Corner off the top. We touched on the Matthew Knies signing, 6 years, $46.5 million. What are your impressions of that deal getting done?
Well, it's huge for Knies, obviously. It secures his first serious contract in the NHL. For the Leafs to get it done before July 1st, I think allowed them to move right on to other business. And, with the confidence that they know they have the player. And, there was so much talk about like offer sheets in the last few months. I never bought that because, for one, Matthew Knies wanted to stay. The only reason I thought it would get that, where that would even become a possibility, is if the talks went right off the deep end and the sides just didn't see the world the same way, then maybe it would become a solution, at that point in time. But, that was never really the case here. And I think for the Leafs, there's a win in getting this deal to 6 years. We've seen some players, Wyatt Johnston, the most recent among them, on their second RFA contract, do 5-year deals, which, obviously sets Wyatt up to be in a position to make a lot more money sooner. He'll be a UFA at a pretty young age when that 5-year deal in Dallas expires. By getting a 6th year, it's just one more year of Knies' prime that the Leafs have secured. For Knies, I think it was a win to get the money up to $7.75 million on the AAV. Probably a hair more initially than the Leafs would have wanted to pay. I still think it's a fair contract. Don't get me wrong, but there's got to be some give and take at the table. And one thing that I understand that happened in those talks is that when the Leafs signed Matthew Knies, remember it was still when Kyle Dubas was a GM, but he was coming out of the University of Minnesota right after playing in the NCAA championship game. And at that point in time, Knies was a pretty hot prospect. He was a second round pick of the Leafs, but because of the growth he'd shown in the NCAA, he had a lot of leverage, and he had the ability at that time where he could have gone back to school And I think it was in his mind a little bit just because, he loved his time at Minnesota, but also, they lost that last game and there was a little unfinished business there. And the Leafs convinced him to sign with them at the end of that season. He played 3 games at the end of the regular season and then played in the playoffs for them. That was the year they beat Tampa in round 1 and then lost to Florida in 5 games. And at that time, though, the Leafs didn't have an ability or a desire, maybe is a better way to put it, to put the bonuses that rookies can get in their contract. And so, I think that at that point in time, they worked through, I was told that contract almost didn't happen in the moment. After, Minnesota got beat out, there was a small window to sign where he could join the NHL team right away. And there was some challenges getting that deal done. And ultimately, there was a belief that Knies probably left a little bit of money on the table to do an entry-level deal at that point in time that the Leafs could stomach and make work with their cap situation. And so I do think in this case that, that's reflected a little in this. I don't know how you quantify that, but maybe the Leafs were a little comfortable having the AV. They grew more comfortable with the AV being a little higher, just understanding he probably gave them a bit of a deal on the way in, which look, that's the way good business is done. And so there was a grind of a negotiation. I think a lot of the work got done on Saturday. I think there was a lot of back and forth Saturday, and then ultimately they got that deal across the finish line Sunday night. They actually still haven't officially announced it as of Monday morning here when we're recording, but I'm confident the numbers that we have are correct and that the deal got done. And I think it's good business for both sides. And again, there's value here. Getting Tavares done, entering the weekend, getting Knies done before the weekend's over. It puts the Leafs in position entering this week to be aggressive. I mean, we know that if Brad Marchand gets the open market, they're going to be trying to convince him to come up to Toronto. As I mentioned, even a player like Steven Lorentz, who was a 4th liner for them last year, they're trying to get signed. And so eventually you kind of have to get things done, if you know what I'm saying. You can talk about what it might be like to do a contract. But I do think the value is just removing any uncertainty. You can take your offer sheet somewhere else. As Joe Hofer's contract announcement by St. Louis said, Joe Hofer is no longer eligible to sign an offer sheet because he signed this contract with us. I don't think the Leafs were all that worried about it, to be honest. I don't think they had any reason to be. But when you got a contract signed before it's even possible for an offer sheet, you feel even better.
Are there any trade protections on Matthew Knies' contract?
I'm not sure. He's not eligible for the first 5 years of that deal for it, I don't think. So probably I would assume in the 6th year, but to be honest, I don't have the full details of how the deal breaks down beyond the years and the AAV.
Okay. So we'll keep track of that as news develops. And if you can, just one note on John Tavares signing his deal with the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's really good value for John Tavares at $4.388 million. That's really, I know he's later in his career, but that's really good value for him.
I mean, look, Brock Nelson signed $7.5 million at about the same age, coming off a less productive season. So that's at least a $3 million savings, I think, on what Tavares per year could have got on the open market. Credit to him. I think he really wanted to work with the team. I think he feels great about how the relationship's gone. He's coming off a $77 million deal in Toronto. This is, much like the Claude Giroux signing in Ottawa. I think there's, players get to a certain point and they're in a position to give back. And obviously Tavares gets it too. He wants to win a cup, right? This isn't just about adding a little bit more money or a lot more money to his bank account. It's giving him a chance to have the kind of career end he wants. And so the first part is achieved, by locking in Toronto and potentially having a chance to finish his career as a Leaf, or certainly to extend it as a Leaf. And he's trying to win now in Toronto. And so, when you look at just these 2 contracts, what the Leafs paid Tavares last year on the last year of his $11 million contract and Matthew Knies at the end of his entry-level deal is almost the exact same amount of money. It's a little bit more now, about 1% more than what they're paying him next year. But the difference is the cap is taking a jump. And they have, Tavares for 4 years, they have Knies for 6. The cap is going to keep jumping. This is actually really good business for the Leafs. I think the way that they've done this, and we can't always say this about them. I mean, this is, negotiating contracts has been especially with some of their top players, with the players they like, hasn't been team friendly, right? Like the players have kind of had their way in a lot of those negotiations. And so, I think something should be said for, like, the Leafs really dug in on Tavares. Like, that went right down, not to the wire. Obviously, there's a couple days to spare before July 1st, but, I think there was a thought it would be easier, just given that the two sides clearly wanted the same thing. But the Leafs, really impressed upon John the importance of getting a deal where they did. And then, as I said, maybe Knies is a hair higher than they would have wanted, but it's still I think a good contract as long as if he becomes a 30 goal scorer every year, and in a rising cap environment, I don't think you're going to regret that deal at all. So, the Leafs have actually created some new opportunities with cap room moving forward. And so, it's kind of this weird period where they're losing Marner, keeping a couple guys, and you're like, so how do they get better? Well, they are better positioned now to make other moves. And they are certainly not stopping here. Even if they were able to sign some like Brad Marchand, that's not the end, right? Like, they still have a lot of work to do. And I think they should feel good about the first few moves of their summer, because, I think that they're ones that position them well to keep. They have to remake the roster to some degree. You lose a player of Marner's caliber, you're not replacing a 1-for-1 with another player. You got to find all kinds of different areas to upgrade in order to make it so that you don't have a big drop off.
We keep mentioning Brad Marchand and the possibility of him in a Toronto Maple Leafs uniform. As of Monday morning, how likely is that to happen?
Every single minute that passes where he hasn't signed a new contract in Florida, you should feel better about it if you're a Leafs fan, hoping that happens. Because I really do believe, well, there will be other teams, should he hit the open market, that get in there. Pierre LeBrun had a report Sunday about the Boston Bruins being interested in a reunion. Again, I'm sure there's someone haven't heard about or I'm not thinking about that's going to make a big pitch for him. I do think it's quite simple enough to say that it's, that if it's not Florida, Toronto has a great chance. But we still don't know that it's not Florida, and I don't know that now. The Panthers have engaged with Marchand in recent days on a potential extension. We've all seen all the content online. It's died down. It looks like the cup party it's either gotten more civil or it's everyone's had to take a breather. I'm not sure which is correct. At some point here, the trophy itself, actually a cool thing they do now, Julian, just a complete aside, they actually get the panel engraved at the start of the summer now. So maybe they've had to take the cup back to get engraved, which is pretty neat when you think about it, because then when it does the tour in the summer, like, your friends and family can actually see the one with your name on it. It used to get done at the end of the summer. Anyway, total aside, but we've seen that Sam Bennett, Brad Marchand, like the fit there was great. And so, the full court press has been on from Florida to keep him, and they may yet still do that. We're going to find out, I'd say, in the next 27 hours or less. And if they don't, though, I do think the Leafs will be in there with a very strong bid, probably a 4-year contract. As I've been saying repeatedly, wouldn't surprise me if it got all the way to $9 million, but certainly north of $8 million is probably going to be the price. And, when the next free agent board, which I got to get out at some point, gets out, it's hard because names keep coming off by the minute with signings and trades and everything happening. But, Brad Marchand's going to be number one entering Tuesday as in terms of free agents, if especially if Marner signs ahead of the market, and with Bennett already off the market. That's where we're at. So he's the belle of the ball right now, because I do think, well, Marner isn't officially done at this point in time. I'm not sure if he's ever going to hit the open market. I don't know if if the Carolina Hurricanes are going to actually get in front of him and make an offer, or the LA Kings are certainly want to make a pitch for Marner. I don't know if they're going to get that chance with Marchand. Maybe a few teams will get that chance. Maybe someone surprises us, but I do think that's kind of where it's at. He's weighing whether to stay in Florida. I think there's at least somewhere in the back of his mind that Toronto could make sense, and then who knows, someone could come in with an offer. I will say this: we haven't even gotten into free agency broadly. There's going to be there's going to be someone who signs a contract that everyone goes, "What the heck? Like, holy, that's a lot of money." There will be at least one of those deals on July 1st. That's my prediction. Take that one to the bank. So maybe there's some offer on Marchand, for example, that I don't see coming. That's just, because someone wants him that badly. The number of players out there they're flying off the board, man. There's not that. It's hard to get better. And so anyway, Tuesday's going to be a great day if you're a free agent. That's the truth.
I'm just wondering though, the Leafs have enough money to afford Brad Marchand under their cap, especially if it goes up to $8 or $9 million. They're trying to think who else could come out of nowhere and give Brad Marchand the offer that he would want. I see him in a Leafs uniform at this point. I could be wrong.
What about Florida, man?
I love him in Florida. I think it'd be great, but he's just in hearing you talk about him, he seems like he does like what's going on in Toronto. And
I don't think it's an easy.
It's not easy at all.
It's an easy decision for him.
No, it
those
isn't.
Guys, he fit in better than you can ever imagine fitting in that short of time, right? And those guys want him to stay. He's just gone through 2 months of the playoff grind. They won together. They're partying together. That there's at least a few side conversations between drinks somewhere out there on the celebration trail with Sam Bennett and the core players in Florida wanting him to stay around. So, I'm not ready to say he's leaving Florida. I'm just setting up that every minute we get closer to noon on Tuesday and then he hasn't signed, it gets more intriguing. Now, that might be also how he gets the best deal out of Florida. I mean, Sam Reinhart didn't officially sign his extension last year until the morning of July 1st, before noon. So, I don't want to be at a point where I'm saying anything declarative at this point in time because I still think it could go a couple ways. But if he gets to the market, I'm telling you, the Leafs are coming in with a pretty aggressive pitch.
So I should walk back my Brad Marchand prediction, is what you're saying?
No, I think you should live out there. You put yourself out there, my friend. I'm just saying that I'm not reporting that. I'm not even feeling that right now. I'm filled with uncertainty because I'm waking up on Monday wondering, does he sign in Florida? And then if not, then it's game on, right? Then it's, if he hits the open market again, there could be some other team like the Bruins. We'll see what they want to do with him. It would be hard for me to imagine him going back. I mean, obviously
he ain't going back to Boston. I can't see that happening.
Here's the thing: from a living standpoint, he's got a house there, he's lived there for years. It's probably the easiest thing lifestyle wise, but I just think pride wise, and he's already moved on and won a cup somewhere else. Now basically they gave him license to be selfish, like he should be. And I don't mean that in the negative terms. I mean, this guy had a long career to get to this point where he's still in demand at 37. I think he should be looking out for him and his family and nothing else. There's no legacy play here. He's still an all-time great Bruin. I think he's going to the Hall of Fame. And when he does go to the Hall of Fame, we'll think of him mostly as a Bruin. But, it doesn't mean you can't have a few years at the end. I mean, Joe Montana played in Kansas City. Tom Brady played in Tampa Bay. We can go down the list. Like guys that you associate. I don't know why you just went to two football players right away. Ray Bourque played 2 years in Colorado at the end and won a cup, but he's an all-time Bruin. I kind of, this whole notion that I don't know. I'm sure lots of Bruins fans, I'm not trying to say you'd love to have him back, but the Bruins aren't winning the cup next year. And I think if you're Brad, you want to go somewhere you got a chance to win and somewhere you're going to cash in and where they really want you.
Yeah, his legacy secured in Boston anyway. But I just think it would be fun to see him go to Toronto. I think it would just be a fun storyline. But also, if he doesn't go and he stays in Florida, I think seeing the reaction of Steve Dangle and a few other of our Leafs friends, that would also be very funny too. So I'll still say it's just it doesn't matter to me if I'm wrong in this case because I win regardless.
The one thing my brain just can't get past. So this guy has won 5 series over the Leafs. They've been part of teams that won 5 over the Leafs, all in a game 7. So he's 5-0 personally, or his teams are in game 7s against the Leafs. And after this most recent game 7 win with Florida, he's sitting at the podium in the Leafs media room. And with no one asking him, he just brings up, by the way, I grew up a Leafs fan. I don't know. I'm not saying that had been a total secret. I think people who really knew Brad and have maybe written stories about his origin probably knew that more, but I don't think that was common knowledge is what I would say. It's not like all those other times when he played the Leafs, he would drop in interviews. Hey, I grew up a Leafs fan. I love beating them now or anything. I just thought that was interesting timing. And it's stuck in my mind because if in the world that he signs with the Leafs, if it ever happened, he's probably sitting at a podium, literally in that same room at that same spot, coming back as a Leaf. That's often where they've unveiled. That's where they unveiled, for example, when Tavares signed as a free agent. and handed him his jersey, and they get the smiley picture and all that stuff. Anyway, it would be it will have either been a troll job, which he's capable of, or it will have been or it would have been foreshadowing, right? And so one or the other, and we're probably going to find out in the next 48 hours which it is.
Come back later this week on the Chris Johnston Show to figure out how this story resolves and the breakdown from that. Anyone else to look out for in terms of teams as we approach the start of the free agent market? Any other teams worth just kind of, just putting a pin on just to kind of look out for?
I'm terrible at these questions. I don't think of the big picture. I'm stuck in the details. I need specific prompts because.
Okay. So we've gone in on Florida, right? We've gone in on Toronto. What about Winnipeg? What about what they could be doing? I mean, they're coming off a year where they have the best regular season they could possibly have. What are they doing to make themselves better?
Well, and they're also potentially losing Nikolai Ehlers. Now, Ehlers hasn't fully closed the door on the Jets, but he's told them his intentions are to look at the free agent market at least. He'd still consider Winnipeg, but usually, let's face it, once you're looking elsewhere, you don't go back. There's been the odd case where that happened, but it's more likely than not he's gone. So, what do the Jets need? They need an offensive player. They need a winger. And, I'd like you to go click on my free agent board and allow you to do this exercise for yourself, but I'll save you some time if you want. And let me tell you, there's not a lot of scoring type wingers, 60-point guys, goal scorers out there. But one that is out there is Brock Boeser. And would not surprise me in the least if the Jets are pretty aggressively going after Boeser. Now, I don't think they'll be alone. I think Boeser is one of those guys we actually haven't talked a whole lot about in the run up here to free agency. But I do think on, come July 1st, he's going to have a fair number of options just because of what I'm saying. Someone will get Ehlers, so that team will feel like they've filled that need. But then, there's other teams out there looking for top six wingers that can put up some points and goals. I mean, there's a fall off after Marner's at the top of that list, obviously, but Boeser is pretty good. I think he's a plan A probably for Winnipeg at this point in time. And the Jets, let's face it, the other big thing that's going to happen for them on Tuesday is they're going to officially sign Jonathan Taves. Now we've known for a week or so, he's coming to them, that he's made their handshake agreement, but they can make that contract official. I think that's still going to be a pretty cool moment when they do a press availability with him. When you actually, I know we've seen the 19 jerseys getting made, but he's going to pull one on with a Jets logo on it. And look, a team like the Jets typically doesn't get its best business done in free agency. They're open about this. They know that they're not winning. They're not going head to head with the LAs or the Vegases, the Tampas in free agency, and usually getting teams choosing them or players choosing them. Now, Taves was one that did. Maybe because of the upswing they're on, the number of good players they have there, they might be able to land a Boeser. Keep in mind too, I've been told Brock is open to a lot of different opportunities. I don't think he's just thinking of one place or one type of situation. He's from Minnesota, so Winnipeg is not far from his hometown. I know there's been some reports linking him to the Wild. I mean, that might make sense. Minnesota's another team a little below the radar free agency wise, but they're looking for upgrades. And I think ideally they'd like a center, but the reality is there just might not be a center out there for them that moves the needle. I mean, there's centers that can help them, that are free agents that they can sign down their lineup, but in terms of top six players, so maybe they're going after Brock Boeser themselves. So that would be kind of interesting. Division rivals pitching for the same player. I mean, that's kind of where we're at. I mean, free agency this year, it's a shallow pool, and I think those top guys are going to get. I think Vancouver offered Boeser something like a $40 million total value deal, 5-year extension before the deadline. I'm pretty confident he's beating that in terms of total value. Now it's going to be more years, but we're looking at a bigger contract than that for him.
Minnesota for sure is definitely going to be one of the more intriguing teams this summer with what they might do in free agency. And Marco Rossi, we've talked about him quite a bit as a trade possibility the last couple of weeks as well. Anything on Marco Rossi to that effect?
Well, I think it's way more likely than not he stays now. The fact we're through the draft and obviously he was out there, and Minnesota, because they were looking for a player. They were looking for immediate help for Rossi. That trade didn't materialize. I'm not going to say the door is 100% closed, but wouldn't surprise me at all if they're now looking to sign Rossi, and because he's a restricted free agent, and keeping him. And then you look to get better in other ways. I mean, you can't be so rigid in your roster construction that it's only one thing you're trying to address. I think you have to be open to, well, if this happens, I'll go here. If that happens, I'll go there. I'll do this. So, with Rossi, I do think that there's a good chance he stays in Minnesota. They're going to be looking to extend Kirill Kaprizov as of July 1st. So, that's another big contract to look out for that's coming. And, what's interesting is the CBA, which we haven't even talked about, but, the framework on the CBA just got finalized. And one of the factors in that is that as of next season, so a year and a bit from now, 2026-27 season, the longest you can sign your own players is for 7 years. And the most amount of signing bonus payment you can give them will be 60% of the total value of the deal, which means if you're a $10 million player, for an example, the most you could have as a signing bonus payment in a year is $6 million. Well, the previous rules still apply. And so I actually think it helps a team like Minnesota get Kaprizov signed, because they can stack more signing bonus on his deal. They can sign him to an 8-year contract now. They can quite frankly pay him right now, or as of July 1st, more money than I think will ever be out for him as a free agent on the open market, just because the contract rules are poised to change here. So in a weird roundabout way, I think that really does bolster the chances for Kaprizov. And, it wouldn't surprise me if Kaprizov's next deal comes in more than Leon Draisaitl, which is, he's the current high at $14 million. I could see Kaprizov pushing $15 million with aggressive bonus structure and an 8-year term and all those things. So, it's a big few days in Minnesota. And then on top of that, they're obviously going to try to make a signing or two to improve their team in the short term. And ultimately their center acquisition might be a kind of a fourth line guy, or a third line guy. Like, it might not end up being something a little close to the top of the roster. Like, if Tavares hits the open market, the Montreal Canadiens are in there trying to get him. The Minnesota Wild are in there trying to get him. I'm sure many other teams would have been there, but there's a lot of teams that had that kind of need, second line center-ish player. And just the way the market's shaped up, I mean, doesn't look like that's out there for too many people, whether you're looking at free agents or even the trade market's getting pretty bare.
You mentioned Montreal. I have to imagine they're probably going to have to go through trade if they want that second center option. Already busy for them over the weekend. They make that big deal for Noah Dobson, and I'm very curious to know what else they could be doing over the next couple of days.
Well, that's a monster trade for them, getting Dobson.
Absolutely.
Over the weekend and on the first day of the draft there, and really bolstering their blue line and adding another kind of younger core piece in the same age band as where the drivers of their team are. I think for Montreal, they're going to look at probably wingers now too. Like, again, you can't just, ideally, yes, you're adding another high-end second-line center, but I could see them, trying to add a scoring winger, right? I mean, there's been some talk about them being interested in Jordan Kyrou. I definitely think that there's smoke to that interest. What I don't know is St. Louis actually going to move Kyrou? I mean, Doug Armstrong, the Blues GM, likes to test the market on his players. You remember the trade deadline, a lot of talk about Braden Shen, which was real. Teams were talking to the Blues about trading for Shen. Ultimately, they didn't make that move. St. Louis goes on a run, gets in the playoffs. They keep Shen. Now he's still there. Kyrou has a no movement clause kicking in as of Tuesday. So this is the last window where it would be easy to trade him, I'll call it. It would never be easy to trade a player of that caliber, but I just mean that there would be fewer things getting in the way of a transaction, like a no movement clause. So they've gauged the market on him, but I don't know that trade's going to happen. Kyrou's probably a Blue later this week. So I think Montreal will continue to be aggressive. I mean, Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon, I like the way they've run their team. I think that if you look at the totality of moves from how they kind of went through their rebuild and the way they maximized an asset like Sean Monahan, got a first-round pick to acquire him, traded him for a first-round pick subsequently, and got some good mileage out of him in the meantime. They've been aggressive. Even the deals that didn't necessarily haven't hit, like the Kirby Dach deal or Alex Newhook, like those players maybe didn't take the jump Montreal would have hoped. like, I like the thinking there, and I like the thinking with Dobson. I mean, they just gave him a contract no one else could give him a year from now when he would have been a free agent, because he's got $11 million signing bonuses, which will be illegal under the new system. He got an 8-year term. He's getting married today, actually, so pretty busy weekend for him. But what a time to get an $11 million signing bonus right as you're going into a wedding. I don't care who you are. A wedding, even when you try to keep it modest, the wedding, the expenses tend to run away from you. It's a little bit like a house renovation. Like you start with a budget and then you just, watch it disappear in the distance as you blow by it. Anyway, getting an $11 million signing bonus is probably a pretty nice way to handle any overages that happened on the wedding front there.
I was about to say, yeah, your wedding costs, your honeymoon after the fact, like Noah Dobson, impeccable timing for that signing bonus to kick in. I also realized we're kind of going around a lot of these Canadian teams. Winnipeg getting a mention, Montreal getting a mention. We gave the Leafs corner at the beginning of our show. We might as well just keep hitting on some of these different Canadian teams at this point with how we've been kind of going through things. So the next team I want to get to is the Calgary Flames, because on your last trade board, you had Rasmus Andersson as the number one trade chip available, and he goes through the NHL draft untraded. Yes, the Flames, they keep maintaining the position that, they're not, it doesn't seem like they want to just give him away for nothing, but there are some fans who are worried that maybe they missed out on a window to get a high value for him. What's the latest you're hearing about Rasmus Andersson?
Well, there was a lot of interest in him. And the other thing to know on Andersson is that he's got some trade protection too. So he's got a say in the matter too, right? And yes, the Flames, I think Craig Conroy's been very open about this. They're comfortable keeping him. They're comfortable delaying this decision or delaying the trade probably till the trade deadline. But, they worked at seeing if something would fit now. And, you had teams like the Vegas Golden Knights in there. I think ultimately Vegas couldn't get the deal to a level that the Calgary was comfortable pulling the trigger on, because I do believe Andersson would certainly have been comfortable going to Vegas if that trade could have materialized. And look, maybe they circle back and find a way forward. Like, I'm not saying that the communication is cut off or that's gone as a possibility. The LA Kings had a lot of interest in Rasmus Andersson. I think the Columbus Blue Jackets were in on Rasmus Andersson. I heard St. Louis might have been kicking some tires there. I think Ottawa was even curious about him. The Leafs, it's no surprise to hear, had interest in Andersson. Obviously, with Brad Treliving having worked in Calgary before, those two have a history together. And so, this is a player that is in demand. He was worthy of the number one spot in the trade board, even though he didn't get traded. And he still yet might get traded, but I do think the deal probably in the immediate term gets a little tougher. The Flames are probably going to get some futures in that deal, and including perhaps could have been a draft pick or draft picks over that would have been made over the weekend that are now, that those opportunities close. So, let's see where this develops and goes. But, everyone, it feels as though everyone is comfortable. Even Andersson understands where this is at. And he's not going to go just anywhere, obviously, because he's got a chance to become an unrestricted free agent a year from now. And he's got trade protection. So, everyone kind of has to work together. And I think for the most part, that's been what's been happening. And, if not, if the trade doesn't happen here in the near future, I mean, he's going to be right near the top of the trade board when we start rolling them out again in the fall, because, he fits a lot of needs for a lot of teams. He's not universally seen as a solution. I think some people do worry about, his lack of skating and how he might age and things like that. But he's certainly the cup of tea of a lot of good teams out there. A lot of teams that have won a lot of playoff games in recent years were among those calling over the weekend, trying to make something happen. And the Flames just either didn't get the offer from a place that Andersson wanted to go, or just didn't quite get to where it needs to be in order to pull the trigger.
I still think Rasmus Andersson on a contending team, you put him on a second pair, that's a guy I think who can help win. But this guy has also had a bunch of wear and tear over the last 3 years. Just off the top of my head, the first year I was covering the Flames, he came back early after getting hit by a scooter in Detroit, and he complained about his back. He was complaining about his back for much of the year. The year after, he was playing through a foot injury. And then last year, I can't give you the full scope of all the different injuries he may have played through, but we know about the broken fibula he tried to play through in Calgary for some of the games in the last juncture of their last part of their season before ultimately resting. This is a guy who's had a lot of wear and tear. I still think as a player, if he's healthy, he gets that rest. You put him in that second pair on a contending team. He doesn't have to take those top pairing minutes. Maybe the underlying metrics defensively look a little bit better. He's still able to generate offense. I think that's an asset teams should continue to kick tires on. Absolutely.
Yeah, and they will. Just because he wasn't traded doesn't mean it's not like, hey, book closed. He's forever a Flame. I think it's more, and the fact that amount of conversation has already happened, I think it gives the Flames places to pick up with some of those teams, and they've got an early sense of where the market's at on them. I think there was some serious draft pick packages put on the table here, like multiple first round picks in some cases. So, again, it's about finding something that works for everyone, and let's see where they end up. That's the best I can say.
Okay. What about the Edmonton Oilers? A lot of people thinking that they should be in the goaltending market. John Gibson would have made a lot of sense for them, except he's now a member of the Detroit Red Wings. What's the latest on that?
Well, certainly they're going to continue to look at the goaltending position. I don't think they're going to make change for change's sake. And Jake Allen is the best available player at that position as a UFA, at least at this point in time. Goaltending is so unpredictable. Maybe someone who signs as a UFA that I'm overlooking a little bit will have a monster next season. I look at someone like Anthony Stolarz last year, for example, was a UFA signing by the Leafs that probably didn't generate a lot of headlines, and then had, just a terrific season and took his play to another level from where it's been. So, there might be a gem to be mined out there that I'm not aware of, but certainly there aren't, 3 or 4 obvious top of the rotation goaltenders to be bidding on. So I think Edmonton will keep doing its diligence there. Nothing's happening on McDavid in terms of, just because Tuesday is officially the day you can sign an extension. I think that one's going to take a lot of time before they get to a point where that conversation really starts proceeding with when it comes to a contract. And so the Oilers got to find ways to get better. They're going to lose Connor Brown. He's going to test the open market on Tuesday, continuing to try to move Victor Arvidsson's money out. Jeff Skinner is going to hit the open market, John Klingberg. So they're losing some parts of the puzzle, and they got to, on a pretty tight budget here, continue trying to find some younger forwards that can maybe push the pace a little bit more. Certainly, I think it'd be nice for them to find someone who can play with Leon Draisaitl most of the time and can click. And on top of all that, they're trying to sign Evan Bouchard, who's a restricted free agent. So there's a lot going on in Edmonton. It kind of reminds me of the situations we're talking about in Toronto and in Vegas, like where you're both adding pieces, you're losing guys, you're trying to make the money all line up. But I think the truth is the work for Stan Bowman and the front office in Edmonton, it's definitely not ending on July 2nd. Like they're going to make some signings here, but they're going to have some roster construction that continues into the summer. I think there's just no way around that fact. And, they're open to adding a goalie, but I don't think that they've 100% concluded they have to do it right now. I mean, maybe it's something you can do during the season next year. As much as we put all the focus on free agency and you want your team to be exactly right in July, the truth is the teams that are trying to win the cup, they have until March really of next season to get the roster in a spot where they're happy with it heading towards the playoffs.
2 more Canadian teams. What about the Vancouver Canucks? We talked about them landing Evander Kane a couple of days ago. What else could they be doing?
Well, they're looking for help down the middle. I mean, add them to the list, right? I wonder if they find a way to maybe get something done with Pia Suter, who otherwise is going to market. And quite seriously, I realize maybe not a big name commodity around the league at this point in time, but he's one of the better centermen that could hit free agency because we've seen so many of the other centers ahead of him on the list signed in the run up to July 1st. The Canucks are they're sort of at where they're at. I mean, they're going to look to add some players here, but they don't have a ton of cap space. I think that's why the Kane move made sense for them too, is getting a jump on the market, not leaving all the shopping to the day where sometimes the prices run away from you and you're in a position where you're making risky decisions or potentially bad decisions. So, that's kind of where I see Vancouver at. Got to bolster that forward group. Still trying to get Thatcher Demko's deal done. He's eligible to sign 1 year out. And I should mention as well, on Tuesday, they will announce an extension with Connor Garland, 1 year out from him becoming a potential unrestricted free agent. He's agreed to terms on a 6-year deal with a $6 million AAV. So they are making some, they're laying the groundwork for future moves, but then there's going to be some more short-term decisions made too on Tuesday.
Okay. And I'll help you out with the last Canadian team on our list, Ottawa. That's a team that I expect them to just make some tweaks in terms of depth. There's some options for them on the fourth line in their goaltending depth. While I think Levi Merilainen could end up being their backup, I still expect them to get some kind of AHL goaltender that could, if you need him to play in the NHL in a pinch, you could put him up there. That is, of course, if they don't bring back Anton Forsberg, which I don't think they will at this point. We'll see. I mean, they've tried to keep that option going, but they seem to be very comfortable with Levi Merilainen and Mad Sogard in their system. We mentioned Claude Giroux earlier. The fact that deal got done, a 1 year deal with a base of $2 million with the different performance bonuses that make it a max value of 4.75, that gives the Senators a little bit more flexibility, a little over $8 million in terms of cap space. I still think they should get a scoring forward. I just feel like at this point, they should be trying to trade. Also, holy crap, did you just send out a tweet about Henry Yokoharu as I was making my point about the Ottawa Senators? Wow.
Sorry, it's my phone's going freaking bananas right now.
So literally, as I was talking about the Ottawa Senators, Henry Yokoharu signs a 3-year extension with the Bruins carrying a $3 million AAV. That is according to CJ, who literally just tweeted that out. That's how crazy it's been in terms of news. Or at least we didn't miss something that broke.
Well, and they signed late last night that I had Morgan Geekie signed an extension there, 6-year deal, $5.5 million in Boston. So the Bruins are keeping some of the younger players. They got Geekie a year ago. They got Yokoharu at the deadline. Right shot D. He was supposed, I think, to be one of the younger free agents. Obviously, some players won't be qualified today, so there might be a few younger, but he's on the younger end of the free agent class, right shot D. I'll tell you this, from talking to teams, anyone looking for a center or a right shot D right now, they're running out of options, which is part of the reason. And I say this respectfully, but someone like Henry Yokoharu is staying in Boston because the Bruins wouldn't be able to replace him easily had they let him walk. So, I got to say, we should probably wrap this up pretty soon and get the podcast out because it's going to be so dated. And this is going to be a nutso Monday into Tuesday. I'll tell you that.
Oh, absolutely. We'll do Ask CJ on another day. We'll figure that out. But thanks for everyone for tapping in on today's edition of the Chris Johnston Show. I'll just put a little bow on Ottawa here. I still expect them to find some way to make a small trade to make it work to see if they could add some depth for their scoring. I'll put a bow on that, unless there's anything else you want to add, but I don't expect it.
Sorry, my brain's spinning. So I hope I made sense today.
You absolutely did, more than you think.
You know what we didn't even talk about? Did you see me get owned on Twitter on the weekend?
Oh, with the skull emoji?
Yes. So on Sunday, we had a bit of a family barbecue. We were down in Coburg, and my niece and nephews were there. I have a brother who's 10 years older than me, so I have niece and nephews that are around 20, 18 to 24 kind of range. And they were loving that because someone came in. I put the wrong skull emoji I was trying to be like, I'm dead. Yeah. There's two choices. I chose the wrong one. And then someone comes in, he's like, look at Unk trying to use the emojis and all this stuff.
I'm glad you've embraced being Unk.
I'll tell you, what's funny is because my niece and nephews found it funny because I literally am their Unk. Quite literally am their uncle. And they know I'm old and that I'm not the hippest. But also, it's a pretty funny mistake to make. So anyway, you got to laugh at yourself at all this time. It's been a fun few days, but Unk out there using the emojis. Maybe I'll just stick to trying to break contract signings and trades.
Unk, I'm looking forward to watching you on Free Agent Frenzy tomorrow on your network that employs you, TSN. Looking forward to all the fun stuff you might do throughout the day. And, of course, your coverage at The Athletic. And, of course, your coverage on The Chris Johnston Show, which we'll be back later this week with a brand new episode. Subscribe to the podcast.
We haven't even talked about this, but I was just thinking we should maybe...
There's so much stuff we didn't talk about today.
But just wait. But we should maybe move the Thursday show to Wednesday if you're available to kind of like capture this. I just feel like because so much will happen Tuesday. If we wait till Thursday, like I think we should talk about what happened, what didn't happen on free agency on July 2nd. But
you want to do that? Because I'm down.
Yeah, I'm also going away for a quick weekend vacation as of Thursday, so maybe it's better to get it done Wednesday.
Okay, all right. So Wednesday, be on the lookout for that podcast.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.